Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We are back with another vBrownBag episode. Welcome to all the folks in the audience. Welcome to Sai. Great to have you on. This evening, we are going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of cloud migrations, Azure, IaC, DevOps, Terraform, pipelines, lions, tigers, bears, oh my. We're going to get into it. Sai, I forgot to ask you how you pronounce your last name. So I'm going to Gunaranjan?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Did I get it?
Oh, yeah.
All right. No, I appreciate that. Before we get into it, if you all want to get in on the conversation, Sean, you've got a guest. Nope, he's gone. He turned off his camera. Hey, Jen.
It's like that thing with the news thing right at the start of the pandemic.
I was just about to say that. That's amazing.
And we're live.
You weren't even giving a dissertation on the Middle East. Get in on the conversation. If you are on social media and you at vBrownBag, you will find us. We are on LinkedIn. We are on Threads. We are on Twitter. I refuse to use the new icon. We are on Mastodon. We are on all the things. This evening, Sai, how can folks find you out in the real world?
I'm mainly on LinkedIn. I don't use others a lot.
Yep.
LinkedIn and just my name after that.
Yep, that's totally cool. We will post your LinkedIn information in the show notes so that folks can find you after we are done with this. And so with that, I'm just going to stop the screen share so that we can all have a nice conversation. Sai, thanks for coming on. How have you been? You just got wrapped up with GitHub Universe and did a couple of fun talks there as well. Whenever you want to flip on and do your screen share, you're more than welcome to, but we're not in any rush.
Oh, sure. I'm doing good. Thank you, Chris, for having me. Excited to share some stuff. So today I don't have a lot of slides. I wanted to just have an open conversation and maybe just, kind of follow along the pattern that we did in GitHub, just, bring up some topics and just have a discussion on the migrations and stuff.
Cool.
About me, I don't know if everyone knows, I'm a principal architect at Paradigm. We are a healthcare company, IT company. We provide, EHR solutions and other solutions for practices and healthcare. So with that, let me share my screen. This is this.
Nathan, hey Nathan, what's going on? There's a bunch of folks in the audience now. This is gonna be exciting.
So today we'll just talk about like three different main areas of migrations, or kind of what we could typically do with when we start doing any kind of migrations with any kind of cloud service. Mainly with this, we'll focus mainly on Azure and using Azure DevOps and GitHub and stuff like that. And then also we'll talk about deployments, what to do and what not to do with deployments into Azure primarily, and then operations and management of resources once we finish migration, primarily again into Azure. I don't have too much. I try to keep the text as short as possible, so I just have two blocks. Let me see if I can. Can everyone still see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so
it's already resonating with me. Do not rush into deployment.
Yes.
It's already resonating.
So at least for me personally, the do's have always been, before we start migrations and stuff, go out, kind of set your design principles and goals, what you want to achieve with the migration. Design principles can range from stuff like, is it going to be a centralized deployment where we have everything, on one big, large network, and then isolated based on network security groups and subnets and so on. Or we're going to decentralize, go with the hub spoke topology, and then have each application, each service in its own spoke network, and then have them all peer with a large network and then share resources that way. It primarily depends on how the organization is structured and how they want to actually accomplish these things. I don't think there's a right answer. Both of the solutions actually work. Some solutions, at sometimes a flat network might be better. Sometimes a hub spoke network might be better. depending on how the landscape of the environment is and how they actually are kind of growing. So I would always recommend, start with that. Also, goals, in my opinion, are primarily what kind of, how do we really want a kind of what we want to achieve, right? Like, so do we, again, in my opinion, I think we should start with cloud native stuff, like, ensure that it's cloud platform native, like, instead of using F5s and fancy load balancers and stuff, start with Azure provided load balancers, app gateways, and then front doors for, front-ending traffic. And if those don't meet your requirements, and then start to, procure like third-party solutions and NVAs to kind of do those same work for us. So those are the kind of first things you want to start with. Once you set these up, then migrations. When we look at each application and say, okay, we're going to migrate this service, this application into Azure, we actually can, if not completely redesign the application, at least make certain amount of changes so that they actually meet these goals. Like, instead of using again NVAs, we can use native solutions and then deploy machines behind them, and kind of do load balancing of front-ending traffic and so on. Like Azure firewalls as well are a great replacement for NVAs, at least a good starting point. And if those don't work, then you actually do an NVA, like any other appliance that's there. The second thing I would actually always want to do is start with management groups. Management groups is a fantastic tool that actually provides grouping of resources. So I'm not keeping up with chat.
It's fine. There's some spicy takes. We have some folks that are agreeing heartily with your statements, and then there are some people that are jokingly saying, "No, just go fast," and we're taking care of it. You're great, Sai. I have idiots in the audience who are also my friends.
Okay, no issues. Just yeah. I suddenly have seen 20 messages. Okay, the other thing is, management groups. They provide great way of managing access, managing policies, grouping your subscriptions and resources together. So if you have one large enterprise migrating into Azure, and you have subscriptions dedicatedly for each division or each group, like say human resources or finance and sales and so on, my recommendation would be to start with management groups, club all of them together, and assign policies, assign access and so on per management groups. And then comes the access management. Access management would be primarily don't just go with the default roles that are available, customize those roles, make them meet the organization's goals, like, least privilege access, only access to the bare minimum that they got to do, or no access to delete stuff or things like that. So that, human beings don't accidentally go and just wipe out an entire subscription or wipe out an entire, resource group, which can take the entire application down and cause, major outages. So that's again access management. Most of the times default roles do work, but then customizing them also provide a lot of benefit. The next would be to implement policies from the AWS world, and I think Control Tower and stuff like that. So these are like, I actually use policies as guardrails for either blocking out completely bad configuration. Like, for example, if suppose someone wants to deploy a storage account with secure transport disabled and everything exposed to the internet and anonymous access enabled and stuff like that, policies are the great way to just block that from happening. There's a lot of times we won't be able to govern every resource creation, but the best way to do that is using policies. And sometimes you want the resource to be deployed, but then maybe just go and fix the resource, like maybe enable, or maybe like something like deploy diagnostic settings, right? Deploy logging on all resources. Not every engineer might know it. Not every dev person might know how to do that. So a policy is a great way to go remediate a misconfigured resource as well. So those, again, you can deploy it at resource groups, at subscriptions, at management groups as well. And, just do it once, let it be. And then as resources are being deployed, they actually either get blocked or get auto-remediated. I also would strongly recommend that there's a monitoring and logging strategy. A lot of times, centralized logging really, really helps, especially from a security point of view. It gives you a single pane of glass. Like, we don't have to run between multiple log workspaces, like say which log is coming, which event is coming from which log analytics workspace, and go track it down and then associate it with the resource and so on. So centralizing all of these actually are actually provide a great operations benefit. But at the same time, considering how Sentinel and other things work, if you centralize all the logs, you might be, incurring multiple ingress costs, like, because Sentinel actually again charges you for the amount of ingestion that actually happens into these log analytics workspaces. So splitting them out maybe between performance logs go to a certain workspace, security diagnostic logs, audit logs go to one workspace, which Sentinel looks at it and stuff like that actually helps a lot. That way you actually provide a single pane of glass for the security team, and then you also provide a single pane of glass for the operations team for the respective applications, so that they get to see metrics and alerts and stuff, and you don't get you basically don't get charged multiple times. And then finally, the migration strategy. That's one major do for the platform readiness. Don't just lift and shift stuff from data centers into Azure. Basically any cloud actually that might work out negatively from a cost point of view. So there's always some kind of optimization that can be done. Like I was saying earlier, switch over from NVAs into native solutions. Start at least with that, and then from there on, if those don't work for you, then replace them with other devices and appliances and so on. And also there's always a phase where we understand what we need versus what's available, right? That time itself we can actually make the judge whether a Azure firewall works or not, or load balancers work or not, and so on. That's my major do's for the platform. But the don'ts would be, don't rush into stuff. There's no one size that fits all. So don't try to push every application to become serverless or containerization or Kubernetes and stuff like that. Don't do that. It might really slow down the adoption phase. If the priority is to just move out to the data center and go to Azure or go to any cloud provider, best option is to just move as is first and then modernize later. As we understand how the application performs on Azure and any cloud platform, then modernize from there. And my final take would be, don't use platform defaults. Please don't use platform defaults. Out of the time, platform defaults are not the most secure ones, or not the optimal ones from an application point of view as well. So don't use them. They actually can introduce some security loopholes in the system. So don't do that. That's my major take on the do's and don'ts of platform readiness. I'll pause here. Any questions? Anything?
Sean, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go?
Go ahead. You go first.
It's interesting because so Sean and I worked at a previous company before our current iteration as consultants, and we did a lot of cloud migrations. It's funny how literally like less than 5 years ago, the big push was, lift and shift, the classic 7 R's and all of that. And this is right here. This is the more nuanced, more planning, more thoughtful approach that we always tried to get our customers to do. To varying degrees of success. Some of them were like, no, the CTO says we got to be in the cloud by the end of the year, and we're like, that's a bad move. And then there were some other companies that we were able to temper their expectations and get them to do things exactly like this. This is very well thought out. This is very succinct. Do you run into those same challenges? Do you see the same things? This is fantastic, but when reality strikes, what happens?
So,
or is that a loaded question?
I don't have customers. For us internally, at least, there is definitely a rush to move, but at the same time, the priority is to keep security and availability of the platform and the services, intact. We, from a healthcare point of view, that's top priority for us. So there are timelines, there are stuff, but then that's the reason why we don't prioritize a lot on. At least we kind of optimize the application and the architecture to meet Azure requirements or Azure stuff, but it doesn't always have to be that we go back the drawing board and fix everything, re-architect entire application and so on. So I think that way we can definitely do a faster paced deployment and go get into the Azure thing, and then from there on, then understand what happens, and then from there modernize every solution, every service to make it more cloud friendly or cloud native. There is a rush all the time. I'm not saying no with that. There's contracts like data center contracts ending and so on. And I think that's where that one size fits all is not there.
That's always the reason too. Oh, the data, we forgot to pay the bill, or the contract's ending next year. We've got 6 months. Oh no.
Yeah, but at that time, if you try to do redesign and re-architect the entire application and say we want to re-architect for cloud and then move, that's going to slow down terribly, right? If you just lift and shift the solution into Azure first, and then later modernize, that way you can still meet your timelines. It will be expensive, but then at least timelines are met, and then from there we can see how we can modernize it. That's how at least we have been doing it.
Mark has some interesting comments in the threads. Think about landing zones for common workload types. Azure Compute Gallery equals. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to bring up landing zones, but I think landing zones was too detailed. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with landing zones. Like Microsoft documentation has a lot of emphasis on landing zones and planning, and planning how to deploy applications and having like a design environment where an application can land into it. But yeah, that I felt was more specific to every organization. Sometimes it might not work, sometimes it might work. So I didn't want to call it out here. But yeah, I 100% agree with landing zones.
Sean, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, do you have in your experiences, because I see this really as like platform readiness, not just for the organization as a whole, but then like you say, there's no one size fits all. Like that's also almost on a per app, per workload kind of level, right? So you have, and maybe that's where the landing zone question came in, where it's like, hey, if we don't actually have we have a baseline, right? And we're going to put things in the baseline, but then like we have these critical apps that like their design principles, goals, their policies, probably much more stringent. I mean, especially like working in sensitive environments. Do you see that a lot? Like, here's this baseline environment. We don't really know what to do, but the data center's closing. We got to throw these apps up there. Like, we're just going to apply these baselines, and then like we'll come back and figure out sort of how to meld them to a better platform scenario for them. Does that make sense?
Kind of, maybe. I think the way, at least I would approach it from my point of view, would be is that the baseline should be, so basically, the baseline would be to at least understand. Sorry, I'm looking at chat. I'm getting distracted. So let me close this. So at least the way I would do it is like, I think a lot of times with the on-prem environment, it's so legacy that folk who built it are no longer there, or they actually don't have documentation and so on.
Right.
So at least in the past, when I've been talking to application teams and groups, like especially clients and stuff, right, we understand, at least we kind of try to understand what they have, how it works, a very, very high level network diagram, if they can, just how many layers of the application do you have, how many servers do you have per environment, how is traffic flowing into these servers, how is traffic going out of these servers, like that kind of very, very high level picture. And during the design sessions, we actually convert that to how it will look like in Azure. And that's when we apply our baseline principles, is like, try Azure native stuff. Like, don't, like in the on-prem environment, you might be having like an F5 or a Palo Alto or a Cisco ASR or something, like one of those network devices there, trying to do some networking stuff. Like, we don't need to push and have the same thing on Azure as well, like unless it's an absolute requirement. Like a lot of the Azure's the native tools actually provide these functionalities. Like if it's simple load balancing, an ILB can do it at fraction of the cost of an F5. If it is a simple a firewall functionality with some basic TLS stuff and everything, Azure Firewall can do it. So we kind of I think the baseline principle should be try and go Azure native, and maybe try and switch to a simple PaaS service. Like a classic example, file shares. On-prem will have multiple servers with a large storage at the background doing file shares, SMB and DFS and all the kind of fancy stuff. And we don't need to do the same thing in Azure, right? You can actually replace that with an Azure storage. That's a simple, quick win of, like a optimization of the application into Azure friendly or cloud friendly resources. And then from there on, well, at least 1/4 of the application is now using cloud native solutions, and all the app services and IaaS sites and stuff like that, you can eventually figure out how to change from VM-based deployments into app services or Kubernetes and stuff like that, and to optimize it for the cloud. That's how I was at least looking at it. So the baby baseline would be start Azure, start cloud native on at least on some services. Try and see if you can make few services pass, like file shares and networking appliances and stuff like that, and then once you're there in the cloud, then optimize the entire application to become cloud friendly or cloud native.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would also say, like, almost you have to have like a communication strategy, right? Because if you're like, hey, you no longer need these, like, you have file share systems on premise, it's going to go in here in Azure storage. When you come to the cloud, here's how you're going to use that, because there's going to be pushback, right? There's going to be like, well, actually, I need this feature, and no, you don't. Like, you can get away with just this. Like, here's how you use it, right? And like having that communication pattern to say, here's how you're going to consume it is important too, I think, for your end users.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there'll definitely be some minor changes. Like even if we keep compatibility from SMB to SMB in Azure as well, but how to use it, maybe the auth mechanism will change. Maybe encryption stuff changes. SMB on Azure is like, I think, version 3 or something. Those things you have to actually update so that your machines on can actually accommodate those versions and things like that. So yeah, the communications and all of the stuff has to happen as part of our design sessions with the application group or with the customer. But there are some low-hanging fruit, like I think Mark is saying, like quick wins that we can actually do and switch over, and then the rest of it eventually get there.
Right.
Interesting. Finally, an actual salient, relevant comment from Nathan. Perhaps add governance to the do list. That's actually a good point. One of his few ones.
I've been purposefully focusing over here. Just see the scroll. I'm like,
Sai, I apologize. I should have told you at the beginning. Please ignore the chat. We will take care of that. We will filter the actual relevant questions from the smarter people in the audience to you. Like Mark and everybody not named Nathan. So from a governance perspective, what kinds of things should people take into consideration for non DoD workloads? let's just take GovCloud out of the mix and just talk about just generic regular governance.
I would say policies. Policies actually, other than just doing like what I mentioned, like either remediating or blocking stuff, policies also can actually, so there are already pre-built set of policy assignments that actually meet a certain amount of governance, like frameworks like CIS or high trust and stuff like that. We actually can apply them on the subscription itself, and actually will give you a report of what all controls are actually what all controls are actually being met, what are not being met, and how you can remediate them. Again, many of times these things can be auto remediated. Like again, logging must be enabled on every resource so that we capture what's happening. Stuff like that we can auto remediate. And other things could be just audit policies, like gives a report and say, hey, these resources don't have the setup, or these things don't have certain tagging or configuration setup, and we can go do that as well. So policies are huge governance from my point of view. They're very powerful. There are a lot of policies, and I think focusing on them and just understanding what all they're capable of doing will actually meet a lot of the governance requirements on Azure services.
And this is just because I'm a dum-dum about Azure stuff. Are Azure policies similar to AWS SCPs? Sean, do you know the answer to that? I don't know how much you know about AWS, Sai, so I don't want to assume.
I don't know much about AWS. I think
Mark says no, it's way more powerful. Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's control tower or SCP. That's what I was reading about.
Yeah, service control
actually,
policies.
I think both of them kind of control it, but I don't think they have the same amount of like it's. I don't think they're that powerful like Azure ones are. That's what I understand from the way it is being done.
Gotcha. Mark's saying you can audit and enforce everything ARM can do. Okay, nice. All right, so that is way more powerful. Cool.
Yeah. Other thing about policy is, I think at least in Azure DevOps, you can. I don't know if you can do it with GitHub workflows. Actually, I've not done it with GitHub workflows. So in Azure DevOps, we actually can have a grading criteria in the pipeline saying that does this resource meet your policy requirements, and as part of the PR process itself, you can actually deny a certain PR saying, hey, this resource is not meeting up with, that kind of doesn't meet your policy requirements. You got to go fix it. So even before a human being can look at your infra as code and, Terraform or, ARM template and stuff like that, you can actually get a policy error saying, hey, this storage account is violating this policy, so you can't deploy this, go fix this and stuff like that. So we actually can do that as well with policies. It actually integrates very well into pipelines.
Mark is going bananas on AZ policy, so I have a couple of new things to Google now. Awesome. I am out of questions. Sean, how are you doing?
Yeah, no, this is great. I don't have any other questions on this topic, though.
So I'll switch to the next one then.
Awesome.
So once we have the migration stuff figured out and we are ready to once we have a design and stuff like that, to actually start implementing. You can definitely do ClickOps on a POC environment, like just figuring stuff out, like convince ourselves a certain thing works. Like again, going back to the design principle, like let's say we said design principle that default should be Azure native stuff, right? But we don't know if it's going to work or not. So we can definitely do a POC, maybe ClickOps stuff, and just do a POC and figure out and convince ourselves, like, hey, this resources will work and so on. But other than the initial POC and sandbox environments, do not do any kind of ClickOps. Don't request is always to do IaC, like infra as code and ARM templates, Terraform, stuff like that. And even when doing Terraform and ARM templates and so on, idea is not to define the same thing again and again, create modules, create reusable code so that, downstream application teams and dev teams can actually reference the module and then, deploy resources. One way to approach it is module again shouldn't just be a wrapper out on the existing code, right? It should actually, add some value. So my recommendation always has been when we deploy or when we create reusable code or modules, have some, defaults that actually meet your design principles and goals. And I'm picking on storage account a lot, but storage accounts are one of those ones which a slight misconfiguration can, cause havoc, from a security point of view. So like firewall should be enabled, or again, logging should be enabled, and secure transport should be enabled, and anonymous access should be disabled. These like 3 to 4 settings can make or break your storage account, right? So those things are best hard coded and defaulted in the reusable code module, so that when someone is just reusing that code, they don't have to worry about these settings. They know that it's going to be deployed securely without any additional kind of rework. We can definitely use policies to remediate stuff, but deploying secure at the first go itself is much better than someone fixing it for us later, right? So that's another point of view. Other thing would be to always do source control and peer review. So when you actually submit IaC, don't keep it local to your machine and just apply it from a local machine. Always create a PR, let someone review it, let someone ask questions, poke holes at it, or say why not this, why not that, and then once it's merged into the main branch or the deployment branch, it actually gets deployed. One other thing that we really emphasize on a lot is the layered deployment. Don't have one pipeline that deploys everything. That's just a disaster waiting to happen, right? So if the one pipeline errors out or someone makes a typo somewhere, you have like a, some 10,000 line code just wipe out the entire environment. We don't want stuff like that to happen. So every application has layers. Like you can have a foundation layer, like which deploys network, subnets, firewalls, and stuff like that. And on top of that, you have which can deploy VMs and then deploy secrets deploy databases and deploy, like kind of do a layered approach so that you don't have like a deity level pipeline that actually can wipe out an application. Even in case something were to go wrong, you only have a certain tier that's getting wiped out, and your blast radius could be limited. And at no point the network can be deleted because you have to actually delete resources on top of it. So you have some kind of protection that can actually prevent the major outage in application. And I always recommend, again, automate everything using workflows and pipelines. The less human intervention, the better. So if it's something that's easy to deploy and so on, let workflows and pipelines do them for us. Like I was talking about gating criteria and stuff, things like that. Pipeline should actually verify and let us know if we are kind of deploying something wrong and error out and so on. We strongly recommend that even every time there's a PR being raised, the code is checked even before someone can check, kind of review it, and there's a plan generated, and the plan lets us know what's going to happen. So that kind of stuff is what we like to automate a lot. Setting up approvals and gates, again, from policies point of view or IaC point of view, ensure that certain criteria are met, and then have approvals. Like, for example, if a plan says it's going to delete like 15 items, that shouldn't be auto-approved. There should be a human being looking and saying, hey, wait a minute, why is deleting so many resources? Like, go check it out, ensure it's validly doing the correct stuff, and then let it happen. And the last thing is to go with least privilege. Least privilege and layered deployment actually go hand in hand. So if you have a single pipeline that deploys everything, now you have one identity that has access to do all the stuff. But if you do a layered approach, you actually could limit what identity has access to which layer. That way, even if, either you have a rogue actor or you have a misbehaving pipeline or you have something, just someone made a typo, it doesn't wipe out stuff because it doesn't have access to go touch those resources. So that's another thing that, I strongly recommend doing from a deployment perspective. On the don'ts, again, don't click off stuff. Don't do that. It doesn't it leads to inconsistent deployments. It leads to Terraform state files and stuff going, getting messed up. And then, don't have one pipeline that does everything. That's again a disaster waiting to happen. So those are the two my big don'ts. Curious to hear everyone's thoughts, opinions, and questions.
Yeah, I really like this slide, and I think it ties back to the don't before of don't rush into a migration, because like even before coming to this slide, I have a few thoughts on this slide, right? Like, so I totally agree, do not do click ops. But to your point, like when people are first getting started with the cloud, it's like, how do I do this? Oh, I can click this button, deploy VM. This is fun. Let me get this, right? But it's a slippery slope because clicking that button leads to doing some development, leads to, hey, look at that, it's working. It's good enough. Now I'm not gonna, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? I'm just gonna leave it, and then it's a slippery slope. But to get away from that, we move to IaC, move to reusable code, start having some environment tiering. But that's a lot of work too, to set all of that up, right? So like if you don't even have this process in place, but you have to get to the cloud, then you're kind of in this catch-22 where like, I want to get to the cloud, I want to do it right, but now I got to step back and do all this stuff, get this right before I can, you know what I mean? Like, so I think this reinforces, and I'm curious to hear like your experiences about this, because I'm sure like there's always trade-offs, right? Speed versus, what's that triangle? Speed, security, cost.
The triangle of good, fast, or done right.
Good, fast, or secure.
Yeah.
Or no. Yeah. Good, fast, secure, cheap. Yeah.
I agree with you, Sean. I don't debate on that. So I think ClickOps works in like sandbox or POC environments. Once we're able to convince ourselves that the design that we are trying to achieve in Azure actually work, either we export that out as an ARM template and then use it as a redeployment option, like kind of redeployable script in other environments. But where they do ClickOps, generally that environment shouldn't be allowed to go live or host actual customer or stuff like that. Like that's not something that would be scalable in my opinion. ClickOps should be limited. And I do agree and understand that if you try to push down the route of like, hey, do IaC, do this, then it's going to take scaling up time, skill sets. People they might be a team who never saw Terraform, who never saw IaC, and it's like, hey, why? Like now I need to learn how to write code and then how to do Git and branch and push and all that kind of stuff. I have no idea. I've not come from that kind of world. I'm coming from a data center world. That definitely is a scaling up, but the advantages of going down that route is tremendous. Like it may take, I don't know, maybe a few hours to a week, maybe 2 weeks to understand all of these things, and after that they can easily scale up and start deploying code. Also, I guess in my take, the last thing would be the reusable code modules is a great way to reduce amount of effort or time that application teams need to scale up on IaC, right? So if the platform team has some amount of reusable code already written and kept ready, when we're onboarding a new application team and saying, hey, you got to move your workloads into Azure, and this is how you get started, and this is all your reusable code. You just call this code and deploy your resources. That's less thing for them to learn. They only need to learn how to use reusable code, and that's it. That way you can actually kind of make it faster, at the same time meet these objectives. And that's how I'm at least seeing it. yeah, but
No, all great points. Yeah, all great points. I mean, it's the trap, right?
I'm not saying no. Yeah. No, I understand. I'm just talking about maybe ideal world scenarios like this, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like Mark says, too many people just kind of, we got a cloud, and we're going, but so many times people don't cloud right? Because they get there and then they get in trouble, and then they have to spend a whole lot of time. I mean, you're always cost optimizing it to some extent, and you're always re-architecting because new features are coming out and now there's a better way to do things. But like, how big do you want that jump back to be, right? Because you don't practice these things like you're sharing here. So yeah.
I have to keep reminding myself that the approach or the angle that I'm looking at this from, it has been like, Sean and I are like the battle scarred veterans that have done this like so many times. Like I'm looking at this and I'm like, yeah, this is. I love both of the slides that you've put up because it really accurately coalesces like the thoughts that we have in our heads, because we have run books when we go into a new company and we're trying to do a migration with them. We ask all of these questions and we're like, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? So getting some external validation for the quote unquote right way to do it is very validating. So thank you, Sai. This is like I'm like a hallelujah. I'm in the pulpit right now, singing to the choir. I love this.
I'm actually having the same feeling right now. As like, because when I was making these slides, I was like, maybe I'm missing something. I should add more stuff. But yeah, I know I'm sure I may be missing some stuff. But in my opinion, this is a bare minimum to get started with. There's so many more things.
Oh, this is a fantastic start. For most customers, for most companies, this is an absolutely fabulous start to starting to think about their cloud migrations. There was one question earlier. In terms of frameworks, do you ascribe to a particular framework like the well-architected framework or TOGAF or COBIT? Is there any one that you like to use or that fits well within the Azure paradigm?
I kind of rely a lot on Azure. TOGAF. I've actually because I've actually learned that thing and certified myself on that stuff and everything. But then
I am too.
More than But I think that's all more to be non-solutions, but not non-vendor or solution specific, right? It's like a very high-level framework. Like these are all our inputs. This is what you got to do, and this is what outputs come out of each phase, and so on. So I think going back to the planning phase, that becomes very important, like to understand where we're starting from, and then what's the output of that phase. Like the output of a planning phase should be, or planning and a design phase should be, like. I got to close chat. Okay, sorry. So yeah, the output of a design phase should be things like, like an architecture that actually we can redeploy on Azure and stuff like that. But other than that, I actually rely a lot on Azure Cloud Framework that they actually have. The documentation is really great. Also the Architecture Center from Azure, they have really good updated documentation there. They have some guidance, reference architectures of how to achieve, a certain design patterns and things like that. So I rely on that as well a lot when we do these things.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, I should. Okay, I think the last slide. I think I have. Anything else on this? Any other comments?
So I will say that I know that people give TOGAF a lot of crap. There are folks out there that kind of like roll their eyes at the Q&A. It's a big book. There's a lot to it. Cool. But I think that there are some good pieces to take out of it, because a lot of the things that I see in the architectural designs, like in well architected in AWS and some of the other things that I'm seeing in other clouds, they're all based on the original TOGAF questions. Not all of them, but a subset of them. So every time I run into somebody else that went down the TOGAF path, I'm like, oh, kindred spirit. You know what I went through. So I appreciate you for that, regardless of the people shouting toga in the chat channel.
I have to say that the exam is tough. It was very dry.
Yes. Oh, it was terrible.
Tough, it was terrible. And the part B was really interesting, because how all the answers are right, but one answer is better than the rest of the answer, and stuff like that. So those are like they don't meet any technical certification. It's a different ball game altogether. But also, I think many of the things right in TOGAF, they kind of emphasize a lot on reusable stuff. They emphasize a lot on commercially available solutions, like you plug that into your architecture rather than building fresh, things like that. So and that's what we've been also talking about, like reuse Azure native stuff, reusable code.
Right.
If it's all available, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like I'm sure that meets your requirement for most of the times. So
yeah, and it's great for wrapping your brain around things like functional, non-functional requirements, risks, assumptions, and constraints, and getting all that stuff. When you have that common vernacular that you can then convey to other people, it makes designing things easier, even if it's not like technology specific.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm
saying about viewpoints. Yeah, the various viewpoints or various views of a design. Like like a network engineer wants to see the design from a networking point of view, like an application person wants to see it from number of VMs and CPUs and how much capacity they have and stuff like that. So that's also a fantastic output of I think one of the outputs that TOGAF calls out.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So I'll move on to the next slide. I think this is my last slide I have.
Awesome.
Oh, wait. This is operations and management. Like now you have, so the idea is that we're kind of coming full circle. We planned migrations, we migrated and deployed using IaC and things like that. And now we have a ton of resources in Azure and we want to monitor them. Again, my recommendation always, my personal opinion would be to start with platform native stuff. They give us enough to get started with. Use Azure Monitor, use Sentinel Defender for Cloud, to get going, understand what is and what isn't available. Many times coming from an on-prem world, we might not even be seeing this kind of alerts on our platforms or on applications. So, start with these, get the bare minimum, going, understand what kind of metrics we get. And then from there on, maybe plug in some third-party tools and so on. Other than that, plan for centralized logging, especially that becomes very important for security events like Sentinel and different of a cloud. They work best when the logging is centralized, so that you get all events and they kind of actually do the whole AI stuff and understand where what log is coming from which event and how everything correlates with each other. They can actually kind of make the kind of analysis. And the last thing from the operations point of view, now that we have SREs and others having access to the environment, start with privileged access management or just-in-time access. Don't provide standing access to anybody more than what's required. If they don't need access to a resource, then they shouldn't be having it 24/7. Like, somebody only is working a certain amount of time, then their access only should be activated for that amount of time. It doesn't need to be available when they're not online or not in office. Things like that is very, very important. Many times, there could be a compromise of credentials and that person not even in office, but then since they have access to it, they're able, things get messed up from a security point of view. So that's very important. And also, not from a security point of view, but also from an operations point of view. And you don't have the access that's default access is not there. In case I click something, or if I click on stop or delete or something like that, right, it doesn't really take the environment offline. So privileged access management that's combined with custom roles is a great tool. And also just-in-time access also is a great tool. You just get access for the amount of time that you need. Again, my take on this was, don't rely on platform defaults. Either it's monitoring, events, alerts, access management. Don't rely on platform defaults. Customize it to meet your requirements. Customize roles. One of the things that we regularly look for is just remove the action to delete stuff. You have access to create, maybe stop, write, update it, and so on. But there's no access to delete resources, because sometimes once the resource is gone, you can't recover it. So just stop stuff. Maybe you can recover from a stop VM or a stop app service or a stop Kubernetes cluster. But if you delete it, the outage is much more widespread. So things like that, again, this is very, very simple, silly things like which, we don't think of, but that goes a long way when, you have somebody starting and they're looking at something and they actually delete something and, cause an outage. So again, don't rely on platform defaults. That's my major take on operations and management. That's it I had for this section.
So the CEO should not have admin access to production, is what you're saying. That's my take. Okay, all right.
Yeah, don't rely on platform defaults. Don't. Again, they're all just starting points, right? I think platform defaults are, hey, you can do this, but it has to be applied in the context of your organization. Many times, majority of the time that doesn't work. It's better to customize a role and then, give it off to the application or engineers and app teams and stuff like that, or dev teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. So Mark, who actually works for Microsoft, is saying in chat, Azure is looking at implementing security as default and resilient as default. More to come. So
I did.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, then the flip side of that is you don't want people to become too complacent with the platform defaults that have been deployed. Nice. Yeah, this all resonates. This is absolutely nailing it, Sai.
I think my point on the don't rely on platform defaults is, it should meet our organization's goals. Like if in case the resiliency as default or security default meets our organization's goals, and please absolutely go for it. But if it doesn't, don't. I think many times we've seen customers, they say, hey, that's what Microsoft asked us to do, so we're just doing it. It's like, no, that's what Microsoft is, having as default doesn't mean that you will just say okay and move on with it. Rethink it, see if it meets the requirements or not, and then either enable or disable it.
Right.
That's the main reason of, again, kind of stressing on don't rely on platform default.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. So it's AWS, GCP, or Azure. It's just like, I know there's a default network. I'm not going to use it. Like, I want control, right? I want to know what is being set up. So, as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no default VPC, sure. Yeah. But again, the default, I think one of the drawbacks of Azure VMs, and when you go to the portal and just to create a VM, it default comes with a public IP address. So why would a VM have a public IP address? Like, it's not necessary. There are other ways to log into a VM. You could do, Bastion. You could do other ways to log in. So that's another security loophole that we have to actually stress on and tell folk, hey, don't do that, don't do this, or have policies to block stuff. Ease of use. Yeah.
Let the great cloud wars of 2023 begin, or the end of 2023 begin. All right, on to the next slide as those knuckleheads in chat continue.
I think the last slide I was going to actually put is like just questions with a big question mark. I don't have any more slides after this. I think the thought process with these slides was to just talk about high level bullet points and this open it up for discussion and questions and
this was absolutely excellent. I mean, all of these topics points hit right on the nose. Despite Nathan and Mark being absolute morons, they do have some good points in there about how cloud migrations work and the thoughtfulness and consideration that you need to be brought into it. Mark, I might regret this. Do you actually want to come off mic? And do you have any questions that you wanted to ask directly? I'm already immediately regretting this. All right, I'm gonna take his silence as no. Okay, he's fine. No, he's good. Sean, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
So I have a few questions. I just don't know. Well, maybe Nathan wants to ask something.
He's never going off mute. Absolutely not.
All right. Thanks, Sai, so much. Like Chris said, I think this really resonates with both of us because again, these are things that's like, these are the things that we think about when we used to go, because we don't do this anymore. We used to go talk to customers. It's like, these are the things you need to do, right? To make sure, because we've seen various, I want to say issues, but just like unoptimized. There's people, process, and technology, right? The technology part, anybody can learn that. The people part, there's always like things there, but the process part is like the critical part, I think, when you're talking about like migrating to the cloud, like having that solid process to understand everything, and even like deployment and operations, like all the monitoring and logging and all that, like having that set up properly so that you go back to the deployment side, and when your pipelines are failing, like you don't need as much intervention because, then we all just get a million Slacks or a million emails like alert. And it's like, oh, I'm just going to send that right to my alert folder because it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, right? But you get so like finding the balance to that too, right? Like all of these false alarms that have no meaning. So it's great tips. And I do concede that Azure documentation is pretty nice. I actually found something today talking about probability statistics to calculate SLAs based on the SLA of the cloud provider. So like a combined SLA calculation. I was like, never seen that before. Makes sense. Probability math, right? If this service goes down, it's independent of this service, and it's the multiplication of it, yada, yada, yada. But they actually had the full thing written out. I'm like, never actually thought about that before, right? I mean, I've thought about it, but like you always just, I'm on the cloud, I'm highly available if I have a couple things spread out across my AZs, or if I have multi-regions, or if I'm using this service or that service, but like the combined impact across your app and things like that are important too. So anyway, it was very well documented. I appreciated that. That was a tangent. Apologies.
No, that's fine.
No, I agree that, I think
we're
availability and security, I think it's very important for especially customers to understand it's a shared responsibility. While Azure can provide documentation, they have to also deploy, with all that multi-AZ or multi-zone and multi-region and so on. Else, another common misconception is like, hey, I'm on Azure, right? Or I'm on cloud, I'm highly available. They will fail over for me. Why should I be bothered about it? It's like, no, it doesn't really work that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the only thing will happen is they can recover maybe from a major outage and get back to a certain state, but they will not fail over for you. Like if the machine is only in one region, only one AZ, and if the AZ goes offline, then the machine will go offline with it. Yeah. So,
or with your data, right? I'm in Azure, and my data's backed up and it's secure, and well, maybe not if you're using versioning. It's just one delete call away from being gone, right? Yeah. So there's definitely things around there that, which is why the planning piece, not rushing in, is so important.
Yeah, and also I think one of the cases was like, hey, IaC was going to slow us down significantly. But I think the initial onboarding effort we put into doing IaC, when production deployment happens, it's much more smoother. We know what we're doing because we've done this already 2 times, or we have code and we have documented everything. Instead of, I hate to say this, but IaC is like a very good document of your environment. Not really. I don't think it's a substitute, but it's a good document to represent your environment. It says, this is what your machines are, this is what it's going to be. You can just click of a button, it will redeploy everything. So that way you at least can achieve a certain amount of faster deployment rather than doing click ops. So the amount of time required for engineers to onboard an IaC is, I think, definitely worth the time. Rather than doing just click ops. So click ops might look faster, but in long run there's more side effects of click ops than just the upfront 2 weeks of IaC onboarding. Again, 2 weeks is like too broad. I'm just making a number up. So yeah,
100%. It's like it's like an exponential curve mirrored, right? So like click ops in the beginning is like the low slope, and then it just shoots up in terms of time use. But the opposite is true with IaC. It's a lot more upfront investment. You got to write out the code, you got to do all the things, but once you have it, then it's just small incremental updates. And it's not even really mirrored because, it takes a little bit of time to start writing it out, but then you just increment, and then from there, it's straightforward. But like click ops, you get this Frankenstein monster architecture out there, and it's all done via the console. Then when something goes wrong and like now it's hard to recover, could be a lot harder to recover from. Who clicked what? Where did I click again? What is this?
And everything piece? And everything with ClickOps is all GUIDs, right? There's random like machine names and network interface cards and OS disks, or everything is just like random GUIDs, and it just makes it so difficult to track it down. It's like, where is this GUID coming from? What is this actually? And what machine is this tied to? And except for the machine name, everything else will be a mess under the machine. Make it more difficult to actually track back or, troubleshoot a problem that's actually happening. Hi, Kyler. Thank you for joining.
By itself, but when you have like multiple apps, it keeps compounding.
It'll multiply.
Right?
Yeah. For one application, maybe it makes sense, but if you're doing like large enterprise migrations and enterprise scale, hundreds of thousands of machines and services, ClickOps will not scale. It'll look, as you mentioned, it'll look very easy. It's like, within 2 minutes I get a machine. Like, but then at what cost? The person clicking it is going to forget what they clicked. So the next machine is different.
It's funny that you said IaC as you said. I hate to say IaC as environment documentation, but there's been a number of times when we've walked into a customer, like, okay, where's your documentation? Well, here is this JSON file. And we're like, oh my God.
JSON. No, JSON. I meant Terraform. When I say IaC
or HCL or whatever,
yeah. HCL is better than JSON. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
If I'm given HCL and versus JSON, I'm at least little bit happy if I see HCL.
Of course, now there's apparently there's a what was that thing that we were looking at, Sean, where you can take HCL and you can create a architectural diagram with just by uploading the HCL code. Was that you that I was talking with that about? There's an AI out there that allegedly can now create architectural documents based on IaC.
I actually heard of tools which do that. They actually can create like a high level, like mainly like a map. It's not. I don't think it's a substitute to a design document or a design diagram.
Yeah, it would be like a conceptual, a very very high.
Yeah, it kind of takes a plan and say, hey, this machine is tied to this virtual network. So it kind of generates a very high level map of the resources that are being deployed. Even right now, even Azure actually can do it. So Azure, if you actually click on so there are views in Azure which actually, if you click on it, actually gives you a high-level map as to this network is hosting these machines, and these machines are tied to this virtual network, and it's peer to this network, and this, like, it kind of gives out a whole flow of how the environment is laid out. So it needs to track a machine down and track its flows and stuff like that.
This might be it. Mark just mentioned this in the chat. Structura.io. I can't remember what it was. Somebody mentioned it in passing at reInvent, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. That might be it, or this might be helping you develop it. I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll put that in the show notes anyway. Cool. All right, folks. Well, we have run up to the end of our time. Sai, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you coming in and sharing your insights with us. All of this hit like this was gold. For those of you that haven't been through the trenches of cloud migrations, everything that he talked about was exactly the things that you need to consider before you start doing what your CTO tells you to do when he says, I need to move up to the cloud within 3 months. This was fantastic.
Or even getting there if you're in the cloud and you're not doing those things. It's great goalposts to start moving towards.
Actually, yeah. This is good all the way around. You don't even have to be. You can have a horrible environment and use these rules to fix everything.
This was a fun conversation. Thank you so much, Chris and Sean, for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. And folks, this was the last vBrownBag of 2023. We are going to wrap it up for the Christmas season. Happy holidays to everybody that has been attending. Next year, we're actually going to be flipping over to StreamYard. We're going to be trying that out and seeing how much we enjoy that. And we're also going to start doing live streams to Twitch and LinkedIn and YouTube simultaneously. So we'll see how that goes. It could be an entire train wreck, but hopefully not. I'm scared. Sai, I genuinely hope to meet both you and Kyler in the real world at some point. You're both amazing, wonderful people, and I super appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, folks. Y'all have a great night, and we will see you again in 2024. Bye.
Bye, everyone.